Thank you very much. I'm now calling the Tuesday, March 18th, 2025 regular meeting of the Los Altos Hills County Fire District Board of Commissioners to order. The time is 7:03 p.m. Please note we are conducting a hybrid meeting, which allows staff and members of the public to attend this meeting via virtual teleconference. In the event that there are technical problems that prevent remote public participation, I have the discretion to continue the meeting without remote public participation options, provided that no board member is participating in the meeting via teleconference, which is not the case today. The hybrid meeting will be video recorded and posted on our website. Because we're video conferencing, we will follow a strict protocol for the benefit of the recording. I will indicate when commissioners, staff, presenters, and the public will provide comments. If you've called into the meeting and are not using webcam, please state your name prior to providing your comment. And if you're making public comments on any items tonight and have questions of the presenter or the commission, please remember to address your questions to me, the board president. I will respond or seek a response or hold the question for a future response at my discretion. Please practice considerate video conferencing etiquette by muting your line when you're not speaking and limiting distracted behavior on camera. District Clerk Vargas, please conduct a roll call.
Okay. Commissioners, I will be conducting all roll call this evening in the same order. Please remember the order so you are prepared to provide your comment or vote. President Spreen.
Here.
Vice President McDonald.
Here.
Commissioner Basigi.
Here.
Commissioner Kadambi.
Yeah.
Commissioner Tonka.
Yeah.
Commissioner Tyson.
Here.
Commissioner Warren.
Here.
Okay, and we have 7 commissioners present. And for the benefit of the recording, I will also conduct a presenters, consultants, and staff roll call. Santa Clara County Fire Department Fire Chief Kurt Cow. Yes, thank you. And we have Santa Clara County Fire Safe Council CEO Shallot. Thank you. Santa Clara County Fire Safe Council Program Director Brenner Cannon. Thank you. Municipal Resource Group Strategic Planning Consultant Scott. Thank you. And I'm okay. Community Education Risk Reduction Manager Gluhan.
Present.
Okay. Emergency Services Manager Beebe.
Present.
Thank you. Programs Planning Grants Manager Woods.
Present.
Technical Analyst Project Manager Cronin.
Present.
Okay. Project Operations Manager Russell.
Present.
Thank you. General Analyst Georgie.
Present.
Thank you. Field Manager Harmon.
Here.
Technical Data Analyst Martinez.
Here.
Community Events Specialist Sachdeva.
Present.
Project Manager Risk Reduction King Rob.
Present.
Finance and IT Manager Moriali.
Present.
General Manager Logan.
Present.
Okay. Deputy County Counsel Forbap.
Present.
Great. And presenters, consultants, and staff are accounted for.
Thank you, District Clerk Vargas. We'll now move on to item 2, the Commission President remarks. But one thing I'm going to mention tonight is just in case anyone's wondering, last time we had our meeting in the little room there, and we actually enjoyed it because it was actually much more collegial. But in discussions that really, in terms of participating with the public and those watching over the recordings, which a lot of people do later, this is a much easier venue for our staff to put this all together and have everyone have space to do things. You can see they've got stuff to work with, so it just works better. So I hope that the memory of that collegial tableside conversation will continue to hear, and maybe we'll have some working sessions in there in the future, but that's why we're here, is it really makes the meeting easier to conduct. And so in my mind, we're all around a small little circle in a little table. All right, moving on. Item 3, public comment. Persons wishing to address the commission on any subject not on the agenda may do so now. Please note, however, the commission is not able to undertake extended discussion or action tonight on items not on the agenda. Items may be referred to staff for appropriate action, which may include placement on the next available agenda. District policy is to limit public testimony to 3 minutes per speaker unless the number of speakers requires me to impose shorter time limits. Do you have any public comment on items not on the agenda? One.
Yeah, one in person.
Alan Epstein, I live in the district. I just wanted to inquire about the plans of the commission with regards to the recently announced CAL FIRE ratings for local area jurisdictions. I expected something to appear on the agenda for tonight, but it hasn't. So I look forward to seeing something in the future. As you know, the local districts have, I think, 120 days to respond. So thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate the comment. Any other public comments?
I don't see any.
None? Okay, great. Move on to item 4, agenda amendments and changes. Any comments from staff on this item? Nothing for the agenda. Any commissioners like to make changes to the order of the agenda for any reason? Okay, any public comment or requirement for changing agenda items? Seeing none, we will move on to item 5, the consent calendar. Any comments from staff on any items on the consent calendar? Seeing none, okay. Any questions from the commission on any of the items on the consent calendar? Seeing none, let's see, I'll entertain a motion. Any commissioner making the motion and the commissioner seconding the motion, please state your names for the recording.
So move Tonka.
Warren seconds.
Thank you. Any discussion from the commission? Any public comments on this items?
Alan Epstein again. I'd just like to mention that 4 of the items on the consent calendar, the information for those items weren't even available until either yesterday or today. I have not had an opportunity to read them. Thank you.
I see. Thank you. Okay, no further discussion. We will now vote. District Clerk Vargas, please do a roll call.
Okay. President Spring,
Yes.
Vice President McDonald,
Yes.
Commissioner Basiji,
Yes.
Commissioner Godambi, Commissioner Tonka,
Yes.
Commissioner Tyson.
Yes.
Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
Okay, and the motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 6, the fire chief report. Item 6A is the monthly reports for January and February 2025, and item 6B is the revised 2024 summary reports for Fire Station 8. And here we are. And I appreciate your being, we're very honored to have the fire chief here tonight in person. And so thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, President Spring, commissioners, staff, and the public. First of all, I want to thank the commissioners for the latitude and the time for us to begin the refinement of our public safety report. This is a report in terms of the format that's going out to all of our served jurisdictions. We, as mentioned before, part of our challenge was we have 2 CADs. We have the old CAP system that County Communications has had since 1970s. And then our new system, which is a commercial off-the-shelf product that went live, I want to say it was in September of 2023. So really giving it time to look through the data fields and then basically aligning, can we report out in a much more strategic way for our public and for the authority so that they can take a look at the information and really ingest it a little bit. I would hope, or at least that's the goal, in a more ingestible manner. So going to the January report, I'll just kind of work through the explanation, or the cover letter or the cover sheet is trying to give some definitions for what the current bar graphs stand or represent. So if we can go to the next page or the next one after that. I want to caution before we go to the data page that we are still refining some of the data fields. And that's just because what it was called in the old CAD is not necessarily what it's called in the new hexagon. It's supposed to be agnostic depending on CAD, but it's just a complicated system because you've got law up there, EMS and fire, parks, lots of different stakeholders up there that are dispatched. So going over this report, the biggest thing that we wanted to accomplish on the cover page of just the count is showing any potential trend for the jurisdiction served. So here for January, you only have January counts going back 5 years. So again, coming out of COVID, there was a dramatic decrease in call volume throughout all fire agencies. People were staying at home. A lot of people were more reserved to even go into the hospital. So there was just a reluctance, if you will, that we saw throughout our jurisdiction for people picking up the phone and calling 911. So the trend that you're seeing for January is that we have definitely more call volume compared to previous five years. That's the column on the left, on the upper left. On the upper right, you should see, or there should be, the call count over the last 36 months. Now, the reason why we choose 36 months is, again, we're looking for a trend. Is there something that we're seeing? Usually February, you'll see a drop because there's only 28 days in February compared to other months that have 31 days. But you can kind of see whether or not there might be a trend upwards for a jurisdiction. And those are total incident counts based on the number of incidents that fall within a latitude and longitude that are within the shapefile that identifies that it's Los Altos Hills County Fire District. Down on the lower left column is just, again, 36 months time of day, showing that there are calls that are generated 24 hours a day. Where your peak times are, if we look at it, it's about 8 o'clock where it really starts. That's your time that people get up and go to work. That's your district where you have a major freeway running through it. And then where the call volume kind of drops off is, I would say, around like 10, 11 o'clock. And again, you just have people on your freeways that may be generating those calls. The biggest difference is in the previous report, we were reporting out code 2 versus code 3 calls on this, on a similar table that you see here. And what we try to do is make it less, I don't want to say confusing, but it's like, how many calls happened in the district? That's how many calls happened in the district. What were the call types? Well, let's do not what did it come in, what did it end up being, but what did the reporting party say it was? So if a reporting party said, I smell smoke, well, based on the time of year, based on where they smelled smoke, we will send a different risk-based dispatching. So we want to make sure, even though there looks like there's a lot of red, that's what the call came in as. On the backside of the organization, we look to see what did it actually end up being. And that's where we have to get it from the records management system. That's where company officers go in there and say, it was the smell of smoke, but actually it was a barbecue. Or it was the smell of smoke, but it was actually a pot on the stove. Or it was a smell of smoke and there was a vegetation fire. So we align those things on the back end. But because that takes time on the front end, we're just giving you a glimpse of how many calls occurred. So if you see and it's just because I need glasses to see up that close, for January's report, it looks like the total number is, 100. Am I looking at January's? Yeah. And then over in the right-hand column, you should see 100. So now those two things will match up. So if we got 100 calls in the table, that's in between the pie chart and the lower left-hand time of day in terms of the distribution, and then you'll see up there, it should say 100. And that's what we should see moving forward with every report. On the right-hand side, EMS calls are represented in blue. That is typical. Your EMS call volume for almost every single jurisdiction we serve is anywhere between 60 and 70%. Service calls tend to be the next biggest aggregate number. And then your fire or hazardous calls tend to be a smaller percentage in that pie chart. Any questions before we move on to the next page? Yes. So sometimes somebody will have a leak in their home and they'll say, oh, I have a water problem. I see a leak outside my home, but I don't know where it's coming from. So it's not a code 3 emergent call, but we'll get there. We'll determine where the leak came from. We have the tools to turn it off at the street level and then call the water department and then they'll come out and see, yeah, something like that is a service call.
Would that also include the invalid assist? Or
So,
does that
yes.
come under it?
Yes, they could. Sometimes they start out as EMS calls and they end up as invalid assists. But if they do certainly come through where it's like, no, the person's not hurt, they just need help off the ground, then it'll tally as a service call.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Next page, please. So the next one really is more for us internally. We want to know how we're doing in call processing, in our turnout times, in our travel times, and our total reflex times. Now, Los Altos Hills has a small area that's urban, believe it or not. And again, this is a GIS shapefile that we pull in. And really, most of the area in Los Altos Hills County Fire District is in the rural area or what we would define it. But what we try to do is target time periods that are part of our standards of cover. And we're working through that process this year. So we've got a full team today. As an example, we had 12 people on a call from County Com, from our operations training and admin and planning divisions, as well as from our vendor who runs our numbers. And we look at really kind of a snapshot, a quick look at the gauge. That's why when I said we're still refining it, there are some data elements that are still a little bit misaligned. And when we talked today with County Com, we realized, oh, how you defined it in the past is now how it's defined currently. So we will continue to refine this report, and you will see. My hope is that you will see next month that our performance is actually a little bit better, because I know that our reflex time is always a challenge. That's your total time from call coming in, turnout time, and getting on scene. That's that travel time. It's challenging in the hills. You've got a lot of windy roads, really a lot of areas to get to, long drive time to get to. But what really matters for us is outcome. So what we're capturing on our standards of cover is what were the outcomes. We really want to measure outcomes and not just simple tallies between intervals. On the right-hand side is the top 5 units that are first on scene going code 3. So this is one where you're not going to see a number that matches somewhere else. We're only taking code 3 calls and only taking first due unit that arrives on scene, because that is where your incident command starts. That's when either the one unit that's going for an EMS call can start mitigating the EMS issue, or if it's a structure fire, you get incident command where a command is set up, and then either resources are downgraded or upgraded based on what the company officer is seeing. Occasionally, you'll get the battalion chief arriving on scene first. Usually, if they're neck and neck, meaning out of El Monte Station, you'll see the 2 going together. If the battalion chief is right there, they'll let the battalion chief get on scene first, rather than passing command to the battalion chief, because then it's a little bit more efficient that way. But what you can see there is 443 incidents are being counted over the last 12 months, of which Rescue 74 had an average total reflex time. That's all of those components from call processing, turnout, and on-scene time of 7 minutes. Again, I think part of the challenge within the jurisdiction here is just the road network. You'll see that Engine 76 is 5 minutes. 557. And that's because a lot of their calls have less complexity in terms of where the concentration of calls are a little bit less complex, but they do have some acute care facilities that they go to frequently, and that might help that statistic. Then we binned everything else into other. So you'll see engine 75 running, engine 374. Again, this is last 12 months. So your units that are here within Los Altos and Los Altos Hills are your top 5 units that arrive on scene. So the move ups that we do, everything else, whether it's help coming in from Palo Alto or Mountain View Mountain View typically doesn't come out here, but that would be binned in the gray area, which is other. And then we have our community education risk reduction activities, and we are still looking to refine those numbers as well. But we just need a little more time as we made some modifications to that group. Any questions before we go on to the map? Yes.
Risk reduction activity comprise?
That is our community education group, which goes out and does combined CERT training, CPR training, any booths that we might set up in conjunction with the folks, with the staff here. There may be some online courses that they have where somebody says, oh, I'm a Los Altos Hills resident. So again, the database, it looks like there was one program, 8 attendees. If you want specifics about that, I can go back and take a look.
So it's in cooperation with the districts.
I believe that there are times that there may be notification or cooperation, and there may not be. So I'll have to go back and look.
Thank you.
Not sure.
I just had a HIZ ably conducted by Ryan Cronin, and a simple thing like a mailbox, for instance, not having lit numbers and the house number, my house number was rather small. So, to reduce the total reflex time, it would be nice if, all members could get of the community could get small little tips like this that would help, reduce the reflex time. So that way you can attend to the fire, in a more quicker fashion.
I agree. Meaning it's nice when we have an ability to identify the address a little bit, when it stands out a little bit more. We do have a lot of tools that help us. I mean, again, we have an iPad that gets us there. We've got all of the mapping layers in front of the company officer. At nighttime, it's still a challenge, though, to make sure, are we on a street or in a driveway? So
Right.
to your point, yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Good point.
A question for me is, what's the call processing is defined as obviously when the call comes in until when? What's the end of the call processing time?
So it's the reason why it's broken down between fire calls or hazard calls and EMS. Since I want to say 2003 or 2004, one of the things that County Fire does is get a jump on the EMS call. So there's a place that at County Com, there are basically 5 questions that are asked in the triage. Can you give me your name? What's the address, location of the emergency? Tell me what's happening. And once it's identified, it's EMS, they go, okay, it's EMS, and ProQA, which is a protocol, is launched. So they verify the location, meaning if you have an address that says 11 Almond Avenue, well, that's not a good address. And it'll say, could you please, define or can you please verify that address again? And they're like, oh, 10 Almond Avenue, which is the fire station's address, right? And then what happens is the call taker continues to go through the actual protocol, but County Fire's engine gets rung down, and that's when the call processing start. Like that's the duration of time. Even though we know that there's additional questions being asked, what's important is that we are trying to get to the person or the patient before the call processing ends. It sometimes shaves off 30 seconds, sometimes because the call taker, or excuse me, the reporting party may have some challenges with either language barrier or maybe not knowing what's going on. It could shave off minutes.
Sure.
So
I see. Great.
So
Thank you very much. That's very, very informative. Thank you.
and then so if there's no other questions on this page, we
Seeing
can
none.
go to the map. Which is the next page. Oh, okay. So the next page, I will tell you there's no change. So we still use our in-house GIS, and what you see there is what the call came in as. So there are red dots, and when I'll go back, I'll look and go, well, that's risk-based dispatching. That's what the call came in as. And then we'll look and see what the records management said it was. Typically, you would not have that many fires in the month of January, but we use red to denote the fact that we want everybody to be aware that when you hear a lot of lights and sirens going by, it is truly based on what the risk is. So if somebody says, I smell smoke, it's behind a house, we're going to send a compliment as if it were a house fire. If somebody says, oh, I smell smoke, but I think it's a tree and it's in January, 1 unit will go. So it does get modified based on several components inclusive of the weather. So that's the report as a whole. We can go through February, just really quickly, briefly show February, and then I think we'd be ready to go through the Station 8 report. So go ahead and go to the actual metrics. Again, this is February's report, and you'll notice that it will encompass on the upper left-hand table both January and February's data. So the incident number will go up as we get further and further along in the calendar year. And then the rolling 36 months that you see, whatever month it was that was on the January report should drop off, and then February's number will show up. And so this will be a rolling trend, if you will, over the course of 36 months. The way you, again, there's nothing atypical to what we've seen typically in Los Altos Hills County Fire District in terms of call volume. Those are things that we look for. We're looking to make sure that EMS is somewhere around 50% because that's typically what it is. Sometimes it's a little higher, sometimes a little lower. And then again, we're going through a space where on the back end, we're looking to see what the call ended up being coded as, and that's going to be what you'll see in our standards of cover. Next page. Again, the metrics there, again, it's taking the last 12 months. not really much to report out, given the fact that we are still refining our process. And then the map. And that is the January 2025 and February 2025 new public safety report format for the district. Any further questions on these 2 months? Okay. I know data is not exactly the most thrilling or exciting thing, but it really is important to make sure we know our data and we report it out accurately, so that community members can kind of see where their risks are. And that's what the map is. The map's really kind of showing you, if you will, where the aggregate calls might be. Again, it's just more for awareness. We can go, if it's okay, President Spring, to the Station 8 report. So the team, operations in particular, the ops division, went through and looked, and they made an error on 2 reports. So this report that you see in front of you, which is the aggregate report for the year, did not get changed. There was a member that identified that the number did not add up and that there was an incongruent, if you will, addition, which was definitely a place that we appreciate. And we made changes on those reports. So the supplement reports that you see were changed. And then on this report, there were no changes because we identified that the error were on 2 reports that were previously submitted to the commissioners. So again, going back here, what you're seeing is incident count by month, and then incident count by year. So year to year to year, you're seeing pretty typically around 44, 42 calls. I think what I'd like to call out really is, if you go to the map page, where the calls are that they're going to. And we're doing our best, because this is an in-house generated report. We're not using our vendor for this report, and it's just because it's a small data set that we feel like we should take some ownership in this report. But you can see over there in San Jose that there's a red dot. That's where engine 374 was asked to respond mutual aid. So again, where we go is where the fire is, and if 374 is directed to be participating in mutual aid throughout the entire county, we will send them, because we want to make sure that we're there to help a community that may not even be here, but we will also ensure that we have the resources here, because if it's staff for Station 8, then it is fire season. So again, you'll see the aggregate of where most of the calls are, and then again, going back to the previous page, thank you, Corey. That's just how it's broken down by count, jurisdiction. If the commissioners would like to see something else, because this is not a template, this is something that we're generating in-house, please let me know, and we can make the modification for 2025 fire season. And that's the end of my report. Yes.
I just was wondering, why is Los Altos Hills number of incidents so much higher than the Palo Alto and Los Altos and so forth?
It's just where they're landing. You're talking about the incident count, why they're more in Los Altos Hills
Yeah.
than Palo Alto. That's where they end up being. So I couldn't tell you. Again, that's a shared resource. And sometimes, from our perspective, there are places in terms of, I don't want to call it a heat map, but there are areas that just generate more calls than other areas. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
One quick comment, Chief, thank you for being a great leader and leading such a great department.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I really appreciate the
Yeah.
clarification on these new, I really like the new charts.
Okay. Great. And again, I appreciate, again, the patience and the time. And again, we're going to continue to refine. It's part of our mission to make sure we know our data really well, because we want to make sure that whatever they're doing out, the boots on the ground, that it's captured, and then we can report out accurately to our jurisdiction. So thank you for your patience.
We'll move on to public comments on this item. Any questions to be directed to me?
Alan Epstein, I first would like to give some feedback on the new report. I'll direct my comments to you, but the chief can hear my comments. First of all, the report only contains aggregate information. So you're not getting any monthly information. So you don't have the visibility that you think you have with regards to the activities that are taking place. Most particularly is the comment on the second page where you see the bar charts. Why don't you bring up the one for February? Okay, never mind. Second point I'd like to make is all these dials, they talk in percentages, but percentages don't mean anything. What do the percentages mean? Does this mean that 20.45% of the time the fire truck got to the location within the specified time period? Is that what that's saying? Well, I think you should put up what the time periods are, at least what the targets are, so someone understands what the 20.45% means. And if you got 20.45% on your test last week, that's an F. If that's what we're trying to show here, that's what we're showing. So a couple comments on that. Lastly, with regards to the question about why are there so many calls for Los Altos for Santa Clara County Fire Department when it staffs Station 8 in Palo Alto, as you saw why, is because they send their trucks all over the county, and Palo Alto only responds to calls right in the geographical area that they're responsible for Station 8, okay? And also, I guess you could also say some of the differences that happens to be with regards to the months. If you happen to show up there in June as opposed to some other month, the number of calls that you might respond to would be different. I would also point out that the error that the fire department made was due to the fact that they didn't include all of the calls outside of Los Altos Hills County Fire District the first time they did the report. And this time they are including those numbers. I did some calculations on the cost, and I'll just like to tell you that the cost of a call from Station 8 ranged between $20,000 and $27,000 per call, because you pay over $500,000 to man that station, and the average number of calls per month is around 6. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
I don't see any.
We'll move on to item 7. This is the, let's see, receiving a presentation on the home ignition zone 100% program concept.
Your mic.
I'm sorry. Moving on to item 7, which is actually an item that I'm going to lead. This is the presentation on home ignition zone. 100% program concept is what it's called here, but we talked about it previously. Some have called it proactive HIZ or opt-out HIZ. It's really an aggressive HIZ. And my goal here in discussing this, I've been meeting with, I've been studying things. I've been meeting with Dave Stewart and Neil Mielke, particularly, who have been really helpful and will continue to be helpful. And I wanted to bring that discussion here so you could, because it's a complex one. It's actually, it's not a simple magic bullet, but there are things we can take advantage of. And I wanted to get the commission to be able to talk about this at a strategic level. So next slide. So I'm going to use a presentation to kind of frame this, because I think it requires a framework to talk about it. First of all, and this is a question I asked as I was getting involved in this case, what is the goal? I mean, is it just spreading education, or what is it? And I think this was the one that I liked, which was, this is about maximizing the number of actions we can get people to take. The question comes up, is HIZ about individual, sort of every man for himself defending your house, or is it about getting enough stuff done that you're really making a town-wide difference? And I think it's really both. It's both for individual and collective defense. There's a discussion to be had here about, is there strategic collectivism of where you should be doing this, but that's a different discussion for now. But this is the goal that everything else is based on. Next, please. This is all just my musings on, as I looked at the different examples, it kind of broke into 4 parts, and I want to give a framework for us to talk about these, both our program and the other programs. That's why a little theoretical background here, just made up by me. And this is, how do you get people to achieve action? How do you get people to where they're actually going to do something in their house? I think, to me, there are 4 stages that seem to have differences in these different programs. One is, how do you get general awareness? How do people even know what HIZ is? I think we have a lot of people in town here who don't even know what that is. So that's the first step. Second step is what I call the process knowledge, which is for the actual assessments. How do you get people to understand, okay, who's going to come to my house? What are they going to do? What are you asking for me? Oh, is that okay? Just getting that level of knowledge is a second level, because there's plenty of flyers that explain what HIZ is. It's another step to understand who's coming. Am I going to allow them in my house? Third step is providing a useful assessment, which is providing specific information on what they should be doing and why. So there's education that will continue going forth. And the fourth is, how do you facilitate the action? Which is, okay, what motivation have you created here, and what obstacles are there for them actually finishing that? Be it financial, in which case, rebates can kind of come to that, or motivation, and I'll leave that and we'll move on to, let me fill this out in an applied way and talk about what we do here. Next slide. Because here's the same framework. We'll talk about what we do. First stage, general awareness. Well, every possible public speaking and the incredible number of hours that our staff has spent, and I should also want to reach, the amount of public outreach through every media way we do, mailings, online, you name it, we've got HIZ out there. Denise has been to more meetings than we can count. Personal outreach, to people at every single event. Using and of course, the key thing, using the Firewise, doubling on top of the Firewise neighborhoods to sort of explain HIZ. So all this that's our awareness program. And we know how tough that is, because you can send tons of stuff to people's mail, and they may not perceive it. But that's, so it's not good or bad. This is, by the way, none of this is criticism of us or the other towns. This is just how you get past that first awareness of what is this HIZ? Why should I even know what's going on? Second step, process knowledge. We spend a lot of time, for those who do move forward and want to do something about it, this is about, for us, it's messaging of what does this actually mean? And we have to be very careful here, because we're trying to distinguish it from other programs that have enforcement issues or cost issues. So a lot of it is explaining who we are, who Fire Safe Council is, how we're not the weed abatement program, which is a big part of the area as well. And what list might you end up on? We put a lot of effort into emphasizing the privacy and no consequence, how long it's going to take. So all that, this is, how are you getting to that next level person, explain this is what's going to happen. It's okay. Please invite us along and make that happen. And you'll see when we talk about the other ones that's different for them. Third is the useful assessment. And we know what that is. That's the one-on-one walkthrough. That's providing specific examples. And I'm going to separate here defensible space and home hardening, because this becomes an issue where some places do more of one than the other. So I'm going to put those together for now. And the key is providing private web login, so it's all private, and that goes along with, that's consistent with our message that, look, this is all for you. There's no consequence here. Don't be afraid. Please come get this information. But it does require some very specific actions we want them to take. And the fourth is, how do we facilitate it? Well, we offer rebates for one thing. And here's where sort of the obstacles, facilitated action really is talk about both the good things and the bad things. And in our case, there's only a certain amount of specifics we can give people, because there are confusions in the codes. Can I go spread gravel everywhere? I don't know. Can I take this tree down that's right next to my house? Do I need permits for this kind of stuff? Oh, you say I changed my roof. Do I have to tell anybody about that? How do we make sure this is appropriate? It makes it a little tougher. I know definitely people asking questions. Well, how do I go about this? Or what can I get paid for? What can I get rebates for? So that's how it works for us. And, we put a lot of time into it. And as you've seen that, the other thing I'll mention about facilitated action is, what is the motivation to actually get that action in that last stage? In our town, I think it's still fear and knowledge. And that's why you've seen that, the LA fires hit, boom, we've got a big spike in people who want this. And that's great, because what we have also found, and I'm not speaking for staff, but I'm echoing what I've heard, which is that when they get to stage 4 here in our town through this pipeline, they're motivated to act. They're not kind of going, oh, thanks to this report, I'll file it in the trash can. They want to do stuff. And so that's how you get action. Okay, let's move forward. Next slide. So what is limiting that for those who say, hey, let's get everybody HIZ'd, if I can use it as a verb. Number one is creating demand, and that's obviously what we put a lot of resource into, and it's still a struggle. Second is sort of the question of LAH resident hesitancy, and that's a lot of things. That's, we have I won't say anecdote, we have experience of knocking on people's doors saying, we're here to help you for free when we do all the evacuation routes. Not a high amount of people say, hey, for free, you'll take care of that? Come on in. You know, there's a certain hesitancy there. And there's also issues about, Los Altos has a lot of gated communities, a lot of gated houses, and a lot of, fear of people coming to the front door. So that's something we're dealing with. It's specific to us. Certainly, our assessment resources right now, the people who are doing these things are tuned to our current demands. And so you've seen that we've got some of our senior staff doing these assessments because it's covering the amount of people who are coming and asking for HIZs. That's not necessarily a permanent limit. That's just that's how we've tuned it now. And fourth, I'll say a limiting factor is, there's no enforcement beyond what we offer them. That's it. There's no enforcement or requirements or anything like that. And that's what we do. And we hope it works. So that's the Los Altos Hills situation. Okay, next slide, please. Now, so what came up was Truckee is seeing their numbers. And let's look at these numbers and you look at that and say, wow, they evaluate, they do a defensible space evaluation, I'll say that carefully, for a third of the parcels every 3 years, so they continue circulating 100%. And that's the number we all heard, and that is and they do that. And this is something that you'd want to achieve. And that, if percentages mean nothing without numbers, that was 5,300 evaluations they did last year, during the season when they can do that. And the question arises, what can we learn from this to apply this here? Because we'd love to be able to say, oh yeah, we're doing a third of all those Altos Hills properties every year. Let's move forward. So here's what's different about Truckee. And this is not a complaint. It's just the context which we have to talk about it, which some of the really advantages here, some disadvantages. In 2021, they had a measure, so it's only 4 years ago, every resident voted for an 8-year tax to specifically fund these wildfire prevention programs, a major part of which is this HIZ prevention program. Now, it's not about, I didn't put this here so much for the money as much as the awareness. They actually had a resident vote that let's put a partial tax on ourselves to really deal with this. So there's a much heightened awareness of something that we have. Ordinance 2/2012, this is where they have enforcement. They have actually enforcement in sort of basically, I will say the same language as sort of we have with the weed abatement program. They have for every property for defensible space to 100 feet. And that language includes, to 100 feet. And they can, if you don't clean it up, they can go clean up and charge you with a lien on your property. So I'm not a lawyer, but that seemed pretty similar to me in terms of the kind of threats we make with the weed abatement program. That's a big deal. So they've got enforcement for defensible space. Another ordinance, which goes to the general context framework here, they require this defensible space inspection for every property sold. So everyone who sells property in that, so every landowner there knows this, or probably should know it, or certainly anyone who bought it or sold one in the last years, they know what these inspections are. So this awareness, the key is that this awareness is built into that town. They know what these things are. They know when someone knocks on the door, they're there for a defensible space. And I'm using that term specifically because that's what term they use. And the final aspect of that is short-term rentals. If you go get a short-term rental license there, and I think we have a short-term rental thing here in Los Altos as well, you can't get one without having a defensible space inspection every 3 years. And by the way, I said 1,255, they limit the number of short-term rentals now. They have a new cap on number of short-term rentals. Still, that's over 1,000 properties that they can't even be listed without having had these things. So this is really built into the fabric of their town, of these inspections. Again, it's not a criticism, it's not a praise, it's just very different framework. So let's going forward, next slide. Let's look at the same framework and see how it changes or how it alters the thing. With awareness, well, anyone who's bought or sold a property or had a short-term rental knows what these things are. Almost 80% of the voters voted to put this thing in the process, so they're very aware. I would claim more than Los Altos Hills, but that's built into the fabric of their town. When it comes to the process knowledge of how this is going to work for them, it's going to be a Truckee Fire Department person showing up. They've hired, with this money that they got from their ordinance, 4 full-time evaluators. And I'll get to the statistics in a minute, which is kind of fun. For them, an evaluation doesn't necessarily mean sitting with you and spending an hour walking on your property. If you're not there, they're just going to see what they can see and put a door hanger on your thing and say, well, this is what we think you have. So it's not, a lot of them are not what you think. When we say HIZ evaluation, this is they call it curbside defensible space evaluation. That means, well, you weren't home, so we looked over the fence. This is what we can see. And then the other thing is that people know this works because they know they have to get these for permits to even sell their property. So there's a process knowledge built in that's how this works. Now, in terms of the useful assessment, they do, I think, pretty much the same thing we do. They use the same backend system, same web login for getting information. It's web accessible. The door hanger, if you're not there, the door hanger they leave will have a code for you to go log in and see it. So that's good. And if you walk around with them, you will get both defensible space and home hardening information. If you don't walk around with them, or if you can't look at your home, or it's curbside, it's going to be just defensible space, the 0 to 100 feet, the 5 feet, 30 feet, 100 feet information. And finally, when it comes to facilitated action, they do have a rebate program for some things, from like vents and other things. I'm not sure the full how much it goes to, but they do have rebate programs. Their ordinances are very clear, and the enforcement ability is built in. Now, my understanding is that it's a fairly benign. They're benign about it. It's what little we know, they don't go and really sort of crack down on people, but the teeth are there. So it's certainly in the language of what they leave you, they can say action required and kind of leave you with the sense that you might want to get this taken care of. So that's what, okay. And moving forward, let's talk about the statistics of what these are. And these are really interesting. So in terms of the 2013 or 2023 statistics, which was they publicized, of the 5,300 homes they did, 65% of them, or basically 2/3 of them, were no one's home. We're just going to see what we can see and look over the fence and put a door hanger on you and see what we can see. Of the remaining 35%, so a little more than a third, you can see the statistics there. Basically half people said, hey, we're home. Oh yeah, I know what you do. Come on in, walk around, do that. Other half said, well, you can go walk around and give me your report, but I'm busy. Can't come in, but walk around. Feel free to walk around and do what do the inspection. And then small number, only 1% said no, go away. Now this is interesting, and I think this really sort of feeds into what we found. When people were motivated, of the 19% there who did actually participate, Truckee claims that those people are 10 times more likely to actually resolve the achievable hardening issues. Now, they define achievable as meaning doesn't require any permit or going into town, and like it probably means a roof. If your roof is, if it doesn't require something going to town for permit, you're 10 times more likely to resolve it if they spent time with somebody, which makes perfect sense, and that's what we've seen as well. 7 times more likely to resolve the high value defensible space issues, and 6 times to resolve the medium defensible space issues. So again, I think this is a consistent story that if people will spend the time to go around, you get motivated people. But they've got some built-in teeth both from the front of this process and at the back of this process that makes this happen. And I should add that they have full-time people. It's obviously seasonal because sometimes there's too much snow to do this kind of stuff. But they claim that they're full-time people. They're doing 15 a day. So 2/3 of them are not home. So that leaves about 5 people that might answer and spend some time with doing full-time. So the numbers work out. So we had 4 people doing 60 of these a day times 100 days of season. That's about 6,000. 6,000. Of which, again, 2/3 of them are just, no one's home, we'll leave something. Next step. Just to use the same framework to give you another place, let's talk about Berkeley. And I just got, Eugenia just connected me with a person who's involved with this, but I've not spoken to him yet. So I thought, just for interest, I went and looked at the website. So this comes from that. So I don't have a full knowledge, but again, I want to show a consistency of how these things tend to work. The Berkeley Fire Department inspects all properties in their very high fire danger zone every year. I don't know how they let people know about this. I'm not sure. The process is they define very clearly, it's the Berkeley Fire Department. It's going to be very similar to the way it works in Truckee. They will ring your doorbell. They will if you're not there, they'll do it from the curb and leave a door hanger with the codes. They're probably using the same backend. So Berkeley is very similar. I assume it's the same sort of assessment, defensible space if they can, home hardening if you're going to spend time with them. Now, their facilitated action is if you have any violations that they say are problems, they're going to re-inspect. And if you don't clean it up, they're going to charge you for those re-inspections. So there's a monetary thing, or they will even go to citation if it's not done. Now, some violations you can repair by sending a photograph. You fixed it and send it in. So it's a little, it doesn't always require it, but they got teeth and they're using those teeth to do it. And so people who are in the fire, again, they're doing it every year. So you're expected that every year you get someone knock on your door. So the awareness is there. Next slide. Okay. So I really just raised this up to give you my information. It's a complex tapestry of stuff that happens that makes this doable. This isn't just showing up at everyone's door, but let's talk about some questions that what can we take from this in a constructive way? Because we want more people doing this. The first thing is the open question that I think we could get some answers to is what statistics could we achieve door to door? Could we get 2/3? Now, obviously our experience on the road, the evacuation hardening is less than that, even for, us doing free work for people. But it'd be interesting to know what our statistics would be. It'd be interesting to know to survey some people, like, do you even know what HIZ is? If we knock on your door, do we even know what HIZ is? Where do we even sit on that? So I think that I think there's something interesting to be done there. And, we're trying to think just in brainstorming, what's a low cost way to do this? If we can just get I'm just proposing a summer intern we could hire, we'd train them up so they're accredited. It takes a 3-day training process and just outline an area and just see what kind of results we get. It would be interesting to see how do we map compared to these other towns that have very different contexts for this. Just a thought, just a brainstorm idea. Another direction that this leaves is what codes and ordinances stand in the way of folks doing mitigated action. We got the questions about the MDA, and gravel, or what can we put down that doesn't penalize you if you're trying to get rid of vegetation, putting something ornamental that's not grass and weeds. What can you do and not harm yourself? So this is just a question we don't know, but we want this to be lined up with good rules of fire safety. Tree removal is always a question. Is that something that requires a permit? What do we tell people to do when they've got a tree right next to their property? And this also goes to the questions of codes and ordinances also goes to not only what people who are here now, but people who are building houses. What should our landscaping process be that's preventing this from the very start? What are our environmental rules? We shouldn't be letting people build houses that we're instantly going to turn around and tell them to go tear their landscaping out. How do we put this in the fabric of the rule set? Because you can see the other towns are really kind of building those enforcement in from the town level in. And finally, and this is kind of related to the second part, we note as there's a new map that's been proposed. It hasn't not been, that'll presumably be accepted, that defines the new red, very high area. We're assuming that there's going to be some new rules coming down from the state that define what's going to happen in that's going to flow down into our town and the district areas. What rules will that require in those areas, and will that alter our approach that we need to emphasize more of that area? And is there some way we can make that all line up so that whatever we're required to do kind of makes sense for that area? And I think it goes along with the other questions. Next slide. That might be it. And that's it. So I apologize for taking a length of time, but it's a complex. I'd like everyone's thoughts. I want everyone to understand the process. I saw it. Jim.
First of all,
please use the mic.
First of all, I think this is an extremely wonderful work you've done. We really, as a town resident, I really appreciate what you've done in terms of comparison, contrasts, best practices, and all the rest of it. I think this is wonderful. I think what we have to do is go through a discernment process to find out within the limitations that you have described, for example, MDAs and stuff like that, what can we do as opposed to there are all these barriers. Right. So for example, we can start working with half-dead trees, stuff like that. Those are not difficult to find and remove, or ask the owner to remove and stuff like that, as opposed to immediately working around what does this mean in terms of your MDA? Would you be violating the MDA if you were to put the gravel around your property and so forth? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that all of these questions need to be taken one level more detail with some kind of a planning process, maybe in cooperation with the town, as just all of it, more or less falling on the district. We have to kind of work with the town. This is a cooperative effort, and it's not an overnight effort. It's something that's going to take several years to get to a right spot. That's my, correct me if I'm wrong. The second thing is that we do have the weed abatement program. How does that fit into this? Or can they be made more muscular? Can they be made more so that they can use our ordinances in a way that it has some teeth, for lack of a better word than you? I think clearly, I think you're absolutely right. Turkey uses a lot of soft touch. It's not all bang, 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 hit their head against the wall. It's just, you work with the residents, but I think perhaps we can do the same thing with our weed abatement program in conjunction with what we have, maybe in a more integrated approach between weed abatement and what we do here. So those are my thoughts, but anyways, thank you.
Please.
So I think the recent events in the Palisades have really been a wake-up call to everybody, not just us, but I think residents in our town. For the first time, I think people are waking up. I get questions like, are your hydrants full? Things like that. People are taking up and taking notice. And I think they realize that our wildfire risk is real. Our exposure is very high. It's a question of when and not if. So I do think it's time that we change our strategy to the extent that we make it not an opt-in program, but an opt-out program. And at that time, if people do want to opt out, we can have a conversation. But I think it's important to be a little bit like a mandate to practice fire hygiene if you want to live in this community, be part of this town. Because when you decide not to do that, you put us collectively at risk. So I think it's really important to understand that it's the collective destiny of this town that's linked to individual homes, and we cannot separate the two. So when you do not participate, you do not participate in our community, you do not participate in our risk and our exposure. So I think it's time to have tough conversations, and I actually do think we will get community support on this. I really do think so. This is the time to act because we will have the support of the community.
George?
And let's also consider the whole fire insurance aspect, because I'm hearing people talk about them getting a satellite, a photo of their house from their insurance company, with the insurance company saying, do this, this, and this, which sounded pretty draconian too. You got that?
Not in this town, but another home.
Yes. So I'm in support of it with the things I've heard before. I think this is the right time. I think this is great that you're bringing up in this fashion. I do think that before we get too holier than thou, let's also confess, I'm not perfect here. I have not done an HIZ. I'm a little worried that if they tell me that my deck shouldn't be attached to the house. I kind of already know that. But even though I haven't done that, you should see the pile of brush on my driveway because I've been limbing my trees up. I know what to do, and I'm not ready to be inspected. It's kind of like not going to the doctor. Okay, so we just have to, let's acknowledge the fact this is a little hard for people. They don't want to be told some bad news. Let's find a way to ease that pain, get them through there. The shot wasn't that bad, and it's not that draconian what you can do. And I think we'll make a lot of progress.
I must say that
Use mic. So, yeah.
I must say that this thing was very helpful because I recently had an HIZ assessment, and one thing's that a plastic deck, like a Trex deck, would be relatively safe compared to a wood deck. But, plastic also burns and then it off gases and it becomes like petroleum. That's, kind of the thing that I came to know. So pretty much everything, or a coir mat in front of your house is, something that you would have to rethink and not have because it's highly, highly inflammable. And then things like the Teen Cert program, I think would be a great resource to use them, the kids, to, kind of make a lesson plan, because I do have a teaching background too, make a lesson plan, incorporate this in schools, you know, so when you have this, and children can often take it home and teach their parents, you know, and then maybe you can have a game, for instance, to say, okay, what are some things that you may think is flammable around your home? So, you know, walk with the parent and then identify things like that. So in a way, just bring these things as a part of your ethos, like say as a part of living in a community that is pretty beautiful with all its flora and fauna, of course. Just bring it in a way that's non-stressful as a part of it. I mean, other things can continue as they are, but when there's a relaxed feeling about it, the next, you know, set of people will already think of, incorporating building codes that are fire safe and having fire safe situation around the house as a habit.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Comments? We got Mark or Toby? Okay, great. Well, that's discussion we want to have. And I will make one comment. I'm continuing to work with fellow residents to look specifically at codes and so forth, because, and much like you mentioned in terms of what is the right answer, that's one of the things we came upon is sometimes it's not clear what the right answer is, and we can't tell you, hey, go fix this problem. I'm not sure what to tell you what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, George.
But, we did have a comment from the public earlier, and I do think that if we were to say, let's just look at our very high fire zones and make that top priority, I think that would follow.
Low-hanging fruits.
Yeah. Any public comment on this item?
I see none.
Okay. In that case, thank you everyone's time. Moving on to
We have staff comment though.
Oh, please.
Well, first of all, thank you for having this discussion. I think it's great. It's always a robust idea to explore how we can improve. We love that. I have two main points. One, just my experience and more anecdotal, having been a fire captain who conducted inspections for county fire. I can tell you the difference between those, what we call our windshield assessments or inspections versus what we are experiencing with HIZs is so much more depth. And I can see, to your point, the relief when we come and we say, hey, you're doing this, this, and this right. And then let's talk about where your opportunities are. Everyone is nervous. It's a very vulnerable process, but you can tell on the other end of it how much they've learned, how happy they are that they had the assessment. And it's just a different experience than what I experienced as a captain conducting inspections. And I don't know if Captain Gluhan and Cronin would agree with that, but just a completely different experience. So that has been, I think, super invigorating for me to get out there and interact with the residents doing that. And I think we're all of us that are conducting these assessments are really enjoying that. My second point is, as you were going through the slides, something that really occurred to me is, so we have county fire and we have these LRA maps that are being rolled out this year, and the requirements that those will be adopted. They will be accepted, they'll be adopted. The code that goes along with that will be, it's not an option. So the one thing I worry about is we have three different agencies here. We have this agency, the County Fire District. We have CNT that they conduct the WUI, the Wildland Urban Interface inspections. And then we've got weed abatement, three different things. People are already confused, and I'm worried that we're going to lose the trust of our public, that they really trust that we are their education only, and they receive this report, and we've got all this incentive to make change through our rebate program, for example. And so that is one thing that I just want us to keep in mind, is already there is confusion and a potential to lose that trust. That is the end of my comments. Did you have anything to add, Denise? Okay.
Great. Appreciate that. I think that's hearing from you guys is the most important information we can, because you're actually there on the front line with it. And I agree that the messaging and the confusion, I think, and Jim, you mentioned as well, how does this fit with weed abatement? I think it's a great question. and it makes it more difficult for us than anything else. I think we like this being on a constructive, optimistic, working with residents who want that kind of information. But I think we need to find some way as well to sort of address the high fire zones in a ways that may be a little more aggressive. And we have another staff comment.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to ask the question of Captain Russell. I'm thinking back when we had the weed abatement letters this week or this month, and I'm thinking there's about 2,000 in one particular area and another 2,000 in another. So it seems like if we're looking at numbers, already 4,000 of those letters have gone out to our residents for this year.
Correct. And I would just want to make a distinction in vocabulary. So those are WUI inspection letters coming from County Fire. That's everyone that's in the WUI. Everyone in the town is subject to weed abatement, 2 different programs. And then weed abatement is what does the enforcement. Does that make sense? So the letters that were sent out this year were based on the old maps. And next year, those letters that will go out will be different numbers. And it's going to be all of those high risk areas, high hazard areas that are going to receive those inspection notifications from County Fire. And they will be inspected on that rolling 3-year cycle. So that's when I look at the Berkeley or the Truckee, that's really Santa Clara County Fire Department. That's what they're doing. And so I'm worried that we're duplicating and confusing efforts. That's my main concern. I think there's a way to improve and expand and get more participation. I just don't know that necessarily, I know we want to take solace in numbers, but I really want quality over quantity. That's my goal, is when we get to do these 1 hour, 1.5 hour sessions with our residents, you can just see the light bulbs go on. They're learning, and they're not just going off of the report now. They understand how fire is behaving and what the risk is, and they can make very educated choices when, they're like, what I'm seeing is really remarkable is I used to have to really sell the 0 to 5 foot zone, and you'd see people, they're negotiating, they're making well, what if I do this? What if I do that? And now they're just like, just tell me what to do. And people are so much more readily willing to actually make those hard changes, because it is a big paradigm shift.
One quick comment. I thought I could escape without anything. Just things that I'm getting from the public is feedback, a lot of questions because I have the Firewise interface. I have people asking me about the defensible space letters. They're like, what is this letter? And the language actually in it. They're like, they've never seen this letter ever before. They've been receiving these letters for 30 years from County Fire. Yeah. So that's one piece. And again, where the confusion starts. And then the other question is alignment. On our HIZs, we're looking at 100 feet of the defensible space around the home and home hardening. And currently the expectation that's adopted by the town and ordinance is 30 feet in the incorporated areas. So again, there's a place where, well, do I need to do 30 feet or 100 feet? Because our report's telling them, to do your 100 feet, which is obviously good. That is the state standard. And that will be the standard that's adopted in those very high zones on those LRA maps. And again, remember that the jurisdictional adoption is through the town. The fire district is not responsible for the adoption of those maps. That will be the town. The town will be providing the ordinances, making those decisions on the best practices that they adopt. So those are the questions I've been getting recently. Thank you.
Mr. Page, I'm going to continue working with you and the other residents to sort of push this forward. So this is not the last you've heard this.
One of the things one of the things that I learned with the HIZ, which is very informative, was that plants can, some plants are not as combustible as some others because of the oils. Like rosemary, for instance, planted near the house, combusts at a faster rate than probably lavender or something like that. And I heard from Captain Cronin that you could get, like, Marin County has a nice website where they have all the plants that, are less combustible that can be planted and things like that. So maybe in one of the newsletters or anything like that, that go out to the public. And I was very glad to see, the activity for this season. I saw this whole thing again, the HIZ program, weed abatement and everything else. Today I received that copy of the same in the mail. However, so I was just thinking, if we did, direct people or have a list for our topography, for our microclimate, if we had plants that, are less combustible that can be planted, to keep that defensible space, that would be another attractive feature for people to read, in a pleasurable way, as well as to be, connecting it with the HIZ program.
Real quick, you're a great segue. We have this month's newsletter that the district puts out is focused on HIZs, and in April they do have a planting class around that. And I think at this point, what I do mostly in my presentations is the high pyrolithic plants, the ones that tend to be the most fire activating. So start with the plants that you don't want. And then start working on, because the list is not just limited to Marin's list. It's just a starting place. There's a lot more plants that, are able to be put in, but it's the high pyrolithic ones that we want to make sure aren't close to the house, because they actually encourage fire as if you had a gallon of gasoline. Like a juniper is equal to about a gallon. A gallon juniper is about a gallon of gasoline. So, and again, shout out to the outreach team for making this this month's newsletter. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure we don't fall into the silo thinking. Town has one responsibility, fire district has another responsibility, WUI has another responsibility, weed abatement has another responsibility. I think somehow we ought to think about this in an integrated fashion. How do we save the town? How do we detect the trees that are most susceptible to getting burned and not get caught up in the technical aspect of, is it 5 feet or is it 30 feet or is it whatever? I think there needs to be integrated thinking gone into this. And I think that can't be done at this level. It needs to be done through some focused group, subcommittee, or however you want to do it, that has membership from both the district and a town and so forth, that we can really approach this in a fashion that ultimately will end up saving the town in a bad days that we, as Commissioner pointed out, is not a question of when, is not a question of if, it's a question of when. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments here?
We have public comment now.
Okay, public
from
comment.
Dave Stewart.
Oh, please, good.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to basically agree with Denise and Paige. I've had multiple conversations with them around all the difficulties of trying to implement this. And I agree entirely that we have to be very careful how we present. But I think the goal here really is to figure out how to get that education in front of people in a more targeted way than what we've been doing. I actually pay attention to how many different pieces I see from the fire district every week, every month. You guys are blanketing the airwaves with information, but we still have something like 5% of the people who are interested in FireWise and will respond to my emails about it. And I think if we can put HIZ in front of them and give everyone that kind of education, the uptake from there is a lot more powerful, and it's more powerful than the town coming down or weed abatement coming down with threats and punishments. What really seems to motivate people is just giving us some information on how to make their homes and their families more safe. End of comment.
Thank you, Dave. Any other public comments?
I see none.
Great, thank you. Thank you for a very lively discussion, and I think this will continue on, and I think it's a really important one. Okay, moving on to item 8, reports on IHFR programs, planning and grants. This will be programs planning and grants manager Woods providing this report.
Hello, and thank you. And that's a tough act to follow. I'm also looking forward to when you get the opportunity to talk to Woodside, because they're right near us and they have a similar program, but their topography and their canyons and their weather is much more similar to us. So Okay, on we go to IHFR. First, I'd like to thank President Spreen and the commission for your concern over having to push our semi-annual reports to this meeting. Thank you, all of you, for that, and also for the confidence that the program and the projects are going to move along, even if we have to push out the reports and receiving direction from the commission an extra month. The fact that we needed so much time last month to talk to all the service areas just shows that we really expanded all of our programs and the importance of each service area getting to explain and demonstrate what we're doing to you as you lead us and advocate for all of our items and budget and those types of things. So we continue to make the efforts that's foundational to the district's mission with the connected road hardening projects, the continuous removal of debris in the chipping program, and the planning improvements like the flashy fuels pilot project that you've seen in some of the past packets. We also have increased a lot of cross functionality between the service areas, which I think is really helping us accomplish each area's missions. We've got different people going on and helping with the IHFR or the HIZs, and then we get help from the other teams for pushing out the messaging of the evacuation routes coming, and also our regional partners. So super excited how integrated things are proceeding as each service area really grows. The other thing that happened is, fortunately, we moved perfectly into an IHFR evening. We've got HIZs, which is debris removal. So even though it's community education, we're also going to hear about I-280 later. So here we are in IHFR land. So get ready to enjoy chippers, chainsaws, and traffic control. Here we go. Next slide, please, Corey. This I put up one more time because it was only in a consent and I didn't know if there was any discussion or questions about how this pilot program is going to develop. The premises are the late seasonal rains that we've had in years past often gets grasses and flashy fuels to grow along evacuation routes that have already been treated. And the town also treats and does its mowing in the second quarter of the year. So sometimes they get caught by surprise after June. So the town is really thrilled to see us put resources behind this when we've already treated and they've already treated, and we might still see things in July and August that are, light grasses and brush that have died along the roadside, and we need to come back and mow it again. So a lot of collaboration there. And of course, you've heard me talk about invasive species before and how they bloom at different cycles, and we do our best not to increase the invasive species seed bank. We sync with the town on this, and the pilot program is just available to escape routes that have already been treated by the district. So
I'm just interrupt real quickly. I'm going to encourage the commission, if you have any questions at any time, speak right up and feel free to make it interactive. I assume you won't mind that, Eugenia, but I think that in conversation here, I don't want to save their questions. I want to have them pipe right in.
And that's why I repeated this slide, because it didn't really, it's been mixed in with other things, but it's new and it's big and it's important, and our regional partners are happy about it. So I just wanted to answer any questions or hear any input. Okay, then we'll go on to the next slide. So here we are in planning. You've seen the 2025 evacuation route projects. In December, we put out a map of the proposed projects, and last month we put out the map of the 5 that we had chosen, and we still have a 6th one floating there if we find something that needs to be put in, into the work plan this year. Then this last bullet is new to the commission. The Highway 35 project through the county that was going to run from the San Mateo border down towards Highway 17. They got a FEMA grant for that through Cal OES, similar to the type of grant that we applied for I-280. They actually received the grant award. They worked with it last year, and they just don't have the staff capacity to complete that 17-mile project. So the county has forfeited that grant. Doesn't have anything to do with us but directly because it wasn't our decision, and the highway is outside of our district, but it is connectivity. One of the things you've heard us talk about is now we have Page Mill treated from I-280 up to 35. So if 35 was treated, then we'd have multiple connectivity there on evacuation routes. And you might recall that 35 was where they were trying to stop the CZU fire, and it had just come across the highway. It was working its way towards us as we had the weather change that really brought a lot of relief on that big fire. So Highway 35 is an important, is important to us even though it's outside of our jurisdiction. And to help with the area, I know that San Mateo reached out to Santa Clara County Fire Safe Council and other partners, and they were able to treat, correct me if I'm wrong, I know you're out there in the audience, about 7 miles of 35 coming south from the San Mateo County border. So other partners have stepped up to try and make this roadside treatment and shaded fuel break happen in spite of the situation that has happened with the previous FEMA grant. So, okay, next slide. Every 6 months, I tell you what we're doing for professional development on our team. I am currently taking the UC Davis CEQA practitioner certification course that ends up with a certificate. It's 5 classes. Some are mandatory, some are optional. You can pick and choose, and of course I've tailored those to vegetation management and the ones that are my electives. Harmon is over at West Valley working on his GIS certificate. They have an excellent GIS program over there that is in their park management program, so it's really specific to outdoors, vegetation, things like that. There's a few other GIS programs in the area. Some of them lean more towards city planning. Some of them, lean towards other kinds of urban areas. So we chose the one that leans most towards what the types of projects that we do. And Ryan could teach this class, but he's taking the Community Wildfire Mitigation Specialist certification. It's through the NFPA. It's only been out a couple of years. It's one of the few certifications that there is out there, because if you've ever tried to describe what we do, there's no real way to put your finger on it. And so it's great that the NFPA has put this package together. So these are the things we're doing to stay current on best practices. Next one. Vendor management is always part of semi-annual reports. Here's our 4 main vendors in my service area. Our drone reports you see in every final project. Santa Clara Fire Safe Council, runs, our 3 big programs with us: evacuation routes, HIZs, and the chipping program. Links provides us with majority of our maps, and of course DUDEC helps us with biosurveys, CEQA compliance, and we're thrilled to have them because we couldn't do what we do without adding these subject matter experts to our. So you'll hear about them every 6 months in the semi-annual reports. Next slide. This is another slide that I put in just to revisit in case there's discussion. It was in last month's packet and we moved it forward. The 2024 district projects have been added to the the countywide CWPP. Thank you, Barbara, for doing that. And this is the CWPP, a snapshot of that website that shows the upper end of the county and all of our projects here. So we've done, a certain amount of projects, and that's the countywide numbers on the right, just to show that, all the things that we're contributing to the entire area. And Marcy and I have the strategic plan update under review. We're hoping to finish that up in April. So then all of our strategic documents, our foundational documents, will have gone through their annual update. The other two were finished last month and were in last month's packet. Next slide. Okay, here we are. This one is, you may or may not have heard of this one, but on March 1st, the governor put out his proclamation of a state of emergency. And in that proclamation, he waived for the entire state, not just the one that was dated in February, where he waived the CEQA and the Coastal Conservancy regulations down in Southern California. This declaration of emergency is specifically for wildfire preparation, and you can apply to have your projects have their CEQA and Coastal Conservancy regulations waived anywhere in the state. So the ad hoc committee and I have talked about what this means, and we're going to put we're going to have the proposal go up through our CAL FIRE unit to see if we can have this exception put together for the I-280 project and the community strategic fuel break. I'm going to submit those together as a regional proposal, because again, as you may recall from trying to work with FEMA and Cal OES, they like bigger projects at the state level. They like to see, more work done. They like to see more communities protected. So I built a regional scale map that shows how they connect a 35-page mill, community strategic fuel break, I-280, the San Mateo projects, so that we can really show that we're working in the entire region, not just our 11.5 square mile district, even though that's plenty big enough. And the ad hoc committee's given the blessing to go ahead and do that because it doesn't change the timeline we're on for I-280. It's a long shot
Jenny,
to get this.
Jenny, I'll jump in here on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Eugenia reached out to the subcommittee. Eugenia reached out to the subcommittee and contacted us. Direction that we gave is that wonderful, proceed, but we don't want this to interfere with what our other activities that we already have underway for I-280. We don't want it to distract from the timeline. If it's complementary, wonderful, but we're not going to wait around another year for a FEMA grant to get going.
Right.
Sorry, Eugenia.
No, that was the next point. You read my mind. Thank you so much. So, and then the benefits of why it's worth putting this out are in paragraph 7. So this proclamation is in the packet so that you can see the eligibility and the paragraph 7. So this actually has to be done next week. So we should have more news in April. Any questions on that one? Okay, next slide.
Yeah.
Question for Jim.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I'm just wondering, does CEQA impact has been lessened by this proclamation on the projects that we are underway, for example, I-280? Because a big issue is the CEQA, right? I mean, we have to get clarification that we are not violating any state environmental concern. Does this reduces that potential impediment?
What it does is streamline it. So I'm just pulling out the exact language here. If you give me 1 second. So what it does is it streamlines it. So we have to still comply with the laws like endangered species, riparian zone treatment, things like that. It doesn't waive the requirements, but it streamlines the process of having to do the biological surveys, the archaeological surveys, because it waives all the back of that, all of that back planning. But when we're doing the project and executing boots on the ground, we still have to comply with the existing laws. So CEQA typically takes 8 to 12 months on a project of this size, which we did a lot of our CEQA. You might recall when we put the grant in for FEMA, we had to have our CEQA in place. So it's not going to hold up this project because we did it already, and it's pending and it's waiting for the next steps in our engineering firm to come on board and things. But if we hadn't done that in the past as a draft and we're just paused waiting for our engineering firm, then we would have been spending about 8 to 12 months getting the CEQA compliance in place for this. The other reason that this helps us is if this is chosen as one of the state projects, then the state's offices help us procure the services that we need. So they help us procure crews to do the work, housing for the crews. That's what's in paragraph 4 is all the paragraph 7. It talks about the assistance and the resources that the state will then help us find. So I-280, if it was, selected as one of these, we could move it from a 3-year project to a 1-year project. Approximately, that's what I've been told.
Wow.
Wow, that's amazing. Huh? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Fingers
So-
crossed.
Right, exactly. So this is the same program that was in 2018 when SR 17 got selected, and the governor then selected 35 across the state. This is the same cycle because he's already done this proclamation of state of emergency in 2018 and back in 2015 and 2019. So this is the third time that he's done this and kind of said, hey, give me the biggest, most effective projects in the areas. And so we're going to submit and say, we got one of those projects ready to go. So, right, fingers crossed. Anything else?
No. Great,
Okay,
thanks.
Great. Next one. And then quick update on Hidden Villa. They, I work with them on the grants to support their grant process. The wildfire prevention grant solicitation still hasn't opened. So what I've been working with them on is, you'll see in yellow, there are proposed acres for that. And that copy of that grant application becomes part of what we're submitting to what the governor's proclamation list. So it won't obligate them because a contract would be put together with each jurisdiction or each landowner. But by including the community strategic fuel break and their work, it shows our regional effect and it shows more of what we're protecting. So they would have the opportunity to join that collaboration if the project was chosen. So trying to find every way to support our nonprofit that has that amazing 1,600 acres, because CEQA is especially challenging financially and time-wise and subject matter expert-wise for, nonprofits that have finite funds. Well, everybody has finite funds, but particularly nonprofits. Okay, next one. I think we're at the end.
That is it.
That is
Thank
it.
you.
End of my report. Thank you.
All right. I see a question over here, George.
Oh, just a comment about the flashy fuels a while ago, and that is, the town's had a real resurgence of a stinkwort, and it's very flammable. And I know the town works to spray it, and open space committee looks to identify it, but it seems to be creeping up on us, especially around 280. And so I would just say, let's keep that on our list as ways we can collaborate with the town to control that invasive non-native weed.
Absolutely. And in the background, I'm working on developing a proposal for our treatment that also would include herbicide. And so we'll see what that looks like in terms of our responsibility, our CEQA compliance, things like that. Midpin has given me their treatment prescriptions and the herbicides that they safely use, and so is the town. So we're working on putting that together and bringing it to you to see what direction you want to go. Currently, we don't use herbicides on any of our evacuation routes, but that seems to be the prescription for stinkwort from the California Invasive Species, Association, just everywhere. That's pretty much all you can do with stinkwort.
Right.
So that will be in front of you shortly.
Great. Any other comments? Great. Thank you very much. Oh, wait, we have a public, I'm gonna have any public comments?
Yes, thank you. My first comment is regards to a question about Highway 35, that grant. It's unclear to me who it is that decided not to follow up on that.
The
does that
county,
have any-
the
which-
Santa Clara County.
San Mateo
was-
County?
Santa Clara County. That's what I understood from it.
Santa
They
Clara
put the-
County?
Yes,
And how much money was lost, if I could ask?
I don't know.
Well,
Okay.
don't know.
And whose decision was it to?
Santa Clara County decided not to proceed with it.
So is that the supervisors decided or the chief decided? I'm just trying to understand who decided to let it go. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Offhand, don't know.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
just don't have
Okay.
that information.
That's fine, thank you. The second question is, I'm just a little unclear about CEQA because there's three statements that were made here that don't align. One is that you said that the CEQA has already been done for the I-280 project, but the budget.
We have a draft.
Yes.
It hasn't been
Actually-
filed.
Yeah, I'm just gonna take this as a comment to me.
Yes,
So we're not gonna
please.
try and respond to this. This is too complex.
But
I want all your comments,
but the budget says we need to spend $350,000 on a CEQA project.
Right.
And in addition to that, all of the evacuation route work that we've done to date hasn't required any CEQA. They've been CEQA exemptions. So I'm a little confused about the requirement for CEQA. Maybe at some point you could
It's a good.
answer that.
Mhm.
There was no packet about the governor's, there was no information about the governor's proclamation in the packet that I saw. And lastly, I guess, isn't there something the district could do about giving a grant to Hidden Villa to try and move this thing forward? Why can other agencies provide grants, but the fire district can't provide grants? I mean, we have lots of money, so I'm just inquiring as to why we can't do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments and questions. Any other public comments? Not seeing none.
None.
Moving on to 8B, which I think will be reports on the IHFR field operations. This will be Technical Analyst Project Manager Cronin and Field Manager Harmon. And also SCCF SC HFR Project Manager Gonzalez also providing reports.
Actually, yeah, Barbara wasn't able to make it tonight. So
Okay.
just
Okay.
All right. President Spreen, Vice President McDonald, commissioners, staff, public. This is an exceptionally busy slide, and I appreciate that, but let me share with you, we've been gathering a lot of data, and that should be pretty obvious here. So we've been doing brush chipping, well, collecting really good data for 3 years. And the great thing with that is we can see some trends and make some decisions about the future of the program with this data. I will be talking to you in a minute about the volume that we've done, the residents that we've served, and a bit about their satisfaction. But on this slide, which will not be in the other slides, is some financial information. And that's the stuff over on the right-hand side. And the good news is we are spending a fair amount of money. Well, we're spending a lot of money on our brush chipping program. It is the largest, I feel it's the largest and the best program that we have. And I was talking with a resident today as I was doing an HIZ, and he was commenting about how many tons of brush he's had pulled from his house, his property. And it's certainly, I think it's the biggest program we have that reduces fuel within the district. Okay, so it's probably money well spent. And when I look at the financials, 2023 is a little bit of a bump in all of this, but that's because we had those horrific windstorms and things. But we got some great benefit from it as well that I'll point out. But when we look at the costs, we had an increase in our in our customer base by 20%, yet our cost only went up 18%. So that's a pretty good investment. And that also doesn't take account for the time value of money. The 2022 dollars weren't worth as much as the 20. Is it the other way around? It is the other way around. So, we're benefiting from economies of scale, I believe. May I have the next slide, please? Okay, so let's focus specifically on volume. Look at 2023. Wow. I mean, it went way up, and we will see when we look at our participation that introduced people to the program. And we have seen an increase in how many people are participating. And so that was a blessing coming that way. But if we just look at it over 2022, we still have a significant increase. So 2024, I'm sorry, quarters 3 and 4 of 2024 went down compared to the previous year. But over the 3-year trend, we are up by 90%. In addition, people are disposing of more. So volume is up as well, yards per resident. What we also see in some of these trends, those summer months, see where the yellow boxes are? Right, when we get into the later portions of the year, the weather starts to change, the days get shorter, holidays start coming in. So we do see a decrease in volume in the latter months of the year. But those at the end of the heavy growing seasons, and fortunately, those are also, fortunately that we're removing that fuel, those are the higher fire season months as well, fire danger months. So we're seeing the greatest volume in those months. All right, can you show the next slide, please? So for some people are numbers people, some people are visual. So here's the same data, but in visual. Look at that big spike from 2023 where we had a lot of trees blowing down. Again, you see the trend there, July, August, September, higher months than traditionally the November and December. My notes here are from last month when I was hoping to be able to talk to you. So this is a month dated, but on the drive over here this evening on the news, I heard a story about how homeowners are taking action to harden their homes and reduce organic fuels on their properties. Homeowners are asking fire departments to provide assessments to reduce fire risks. The recent California fires and the insurance coverage concerns are really driving that request. So I know from my friends at County Fire, they're getting a lot of requests, and we are doing good outreach, not only to our community, but also to our fire department to say, hey, when you get those calls, here's our number, have them come to us. And we're getting those referrals. We'll leave it at that. I got more coming on some other stuff. All right, may I see the next slide, please? All right, so let's talk about participation. Again, that has gone up. So we saw a dip from last year by just a little bit, 4%. But overall, our participation is up 20% from 2022. So I think the awareness and engagement is up. When the change since 2022 also is we do it monthly. So I think that helps a lot as well. Our systems are in place where we can do that. We were worried about routing and registration, all that, and everything is working really well with Fireside. So we're able to have people every month, and participation is great. If you missed your month back then, you probably found another way of disposing it. Maybe it was through our collection, or you just paid to have it done. So because it's monthly, I think people are really engaging and taking advantage of it. All right, take the next slide, please. Same idea, we'll show it to you graphically. So there's our participation. Again, follows that trend. Those July, August, September is the peak. 2023 is going to be sticking up high, I think, for a long time. But there is a trend there. It's kind of hard to see in the level, but it is going up at about 20%. All right. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay. So how satisfied are they? We're reaching people more. You can see that our responses are better. So hopefully the sample population is better. Our rating has gone up. We're not quite at a solid 5, but I guess we'll never get there. But we're looking pretty good at 5.82. What's concerning is the percentage of rating 1. We had a pretty high number 1 rating in 2023, and maybe that was with new people coming on, frustration with what they were dealing with, large volumes. We were doing a lot of adjusting during that time. I think we were a couple of months where we had a 3-week collection window, and that was beyond what we wanted to do. So maybe that was why that came up. But fortunately, if you look at our ratings of 5, they continue to go up. And the other numbers, the other better ratings are reasonable as well. One of our big challenges is getting an actual response from people, because they don't have to give us their contact information. It's like, I realize you gave me a 1, and I'm feeling kind of down about that, but let's be friends and tell me, what can I do for you? And that outreach is difficult. And so we're trying to do more with that, to be able to ask people what they want and how we can help them. I want to give a shout out to Edgar. Edgar did all this data mining on this. There is far more to his research, and that was in the packet that you should have received last month, about what people appreciate about our program. And one more slide, we'll show it to you graphically. There you go. So the 5s are a lot higher than anything else. So that's a pretty important metric. All right. Is that my next slide too?
Well, that was your next slide, I believe. No, that's not.
No, that's Harmon's next slide. I have another slide coming up later. We'll have Harmon jump in there. Any questions for defensible space brush chipping?
Yep.
Yes.
Go ahead.
It's not so much a question. First of all, I just want to, I'm a very, very happy customer. We took out incredible amount. I didn't think it would be even possible to take that much out of our yard. And in fact, we did. And it got moved out in very quick term. And I'm very, very happy about that. Thank you so much. But the second question I have is, I've never received any request for response of how am I satisfied customer, or what was a good part about it, what not. Maybe I'm unique, but I did not receive one of those requests. Perhaps maybe there are others that have not actually received it.
Okay.
That could be something that you might want to work on, because I think the work that you're doing is so wonderful. It needs to be recognized.
Okay. Those follow-up surveys come from Fireside. When we mark that the pile has been chipped and taken care of, it generates that email as a response. So we'll pursue that, because possibly it's in someone's spam folder, whatever, but and we want to, maybe we can do some acknowledgement on the front end. I know it's not in my spam folder, because I get inundated from Fireside, because I want to see how that communication is going on. I will one more shout out to Barbara Gonzalez. She wasn't able to make it tonight, but she is the cornerstone of this program right now. And I really appreciate her help in putting this together, as well as running the program.
And I would like to also second his opinion, Commissioner Basenji's opinion. I'm also a very satisfied community member, looking at it from another. Initially, there was a lot of trepidation. I was like, what am I letting myself in for? But it was a huge sense of relief. And as one of you mentioned, also I came to know, I think it was Paige who said that, also came to know what were some of the things that we were doing right, and the things that we could, definitely change. So all these things, and it's a big asset to the residents and the community. So I think people should put aside hesitancy and trepidation and just go ahead and everyone should and must take this HIZ assessment. So thank you once again. And you were so brave getting under the deck on the concrete. I was actually, hoping that your knees, everything would be okay, but you were so brave walking on the mud and everything else. So thank you once again.
You're very welcome. And today I braved facing a golden retriever. So
I also did not receive a survey. I love
Okay.
the service. And I also appreciate the graphics.
My crayons. I believe it's turned over to Harmon.
Yeah, hi, can you guys hear me?
Oh, no, hang on. I'm sorry. I was trying to get Roger's attention this whole time. Another satisfied customer. I'm pretty sure I got the survey, but here's the thing. My neighbor complained to me that your limit was 4-inch branch sizes, and I did nothing. But you switched it to 6 inches, and he thinks I'm a hero. But let's keep it a secret.
And it's now 8.
It's 8?
It's 8 now?
I hear 10?
Oh, I am
That's
in.
great to have. That's
I
good
am
to
in.
know.
Now we're talking logs.
That's great.
Yeah, getting the word out about changes, it being monthly, it now being 8-inch diameter that we can handle. Those are all our challenges. And the surveys not being found is another one. We're on the satisfaction page, and my point is for those is I think we're doing a lot of effort to make sure that we're improving. We have limits. It is a government program. It's not like hiring a private contractor. And so we have restraints, and we're servicing 120 customers a month. So we do have some limits, but I think for the most part, we're being as responsive as we can to our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. That 8-inch amount is huge, because PG&E left me with a lot of bigger than 4-inch branches that they cut down. Yeah.
I can't use my most valuable thing I've learned. Do you know how wide a dollar bill is? It's 6 1/8 inches. So I always have a 6-inch measurement with me. Now what am I going to do?
Yeah. All right. Moving on.
Roger, I think I have a comment.
Please.
I just want to compliment both Barbara, of course, and Ryan on the work that they've been doing with that program. It's really excellent. But I also want to note too that people sorry, Amanda Brenner Cannon, I'm the program director for the Fire Safe Council. But people are more likely, if they're dissatisfied, to seek some sort of survey or some way to say that they're dissatisfied, and they're going to be less likely to seek out those surveys or whatever that might be to complement. So we'll definitely work as a team to figure out why those surveys aren't seemingly more readily available to those that are happy customers. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, Harmon.
My turn? Are we
Yes.
sure? Okay. Got the slide. All right. Good evening, commissioners, staff, public. It's good to see you guys. I feel like I haven't been here to talk to you in a while. So it's good to see all of you. During the 6-month period from August through December, we focused on expanding our evacuation route projects, improving efficiency through partnerships, and adapting to evolving wildfire risks. While the slides provide the specific details, I want to highlight the key takeaways from the strategic insights from our recent efforts. Through careful planning, collaboration, and community engagement, we've not only completed critical wildfire mitigation work ahead of schedule, but we've also built a strong foundation for continued success. So tonight, I'll provide an overview of our recent accomplishments, the efficiencies we've gained, and the next steps to ensure we remain proactive in protecting our region. Next slide, please. During the second half of 2024, we've made significant progress in improving evacuation route safety. Our work focused on 3 primary areas: increasing the scope of treatment, strengthening community engagement, and refining our risk mitigation strategies. First, we expanded the number of miles and acres treated, increasing the overall resilience of our evacuation routes. Second, we saw a notable improvement in community cooperation with more residents granting access to their properties for fuel reduction work. This increased participation allowed us to implement broader mitigation projects and enhance fire safety measures in key areas. Lastly, we refined our approach by incorporating a deeper understanding of regional flora and fauna. This ensured that our efforts aligned with environmental preservation goals while maintaining compliance with easement agreements and fire ordinances. These combined efforts demonstrate our commitment to strategic long-term vision rather than short-term project goal completions. To expand on our collaboration and efficiency, our success in wildfire mitigation and evacuation route improvement is the result of strong partnerships. We've worked closely with the Santa Clara County Fire Safe Council, the Town of Los Altos Hills, County Roads and Airports Department, Caltrans, and local fire departments, biological consulting firms, and most importantly, our residents. These partnerships have enabled us to improve permitting efficiency, coordinate resources more effectively, and expanding our reach. One of our key achievements during this period has been the increase in our right of entry agreements, allowing us to treat more areas than in previous reporting periods. With more properties made available to our work, we've been able to make our projects more effective. Additionally, our streamlined permitting process has reduced delays, ensuring our crews can begin treatment on time and without the need for costly delays. Moving forward, we aim to strengthen these relationships even further by continuing to build trust with the residents and expanding coordination with our partnering agencies. We can take longer scale projects like the I-280 project being a good example. Next slide, please. The results of this approach are tangible. We have reduced project completion times, optimized the use of resources, and strengthened public confidence in our wildfire preparedness efforts. As wildfire risks continue to evolve, so must our strategies. One of our key properties is leveraging data-driven decisions making. Boy, that's a tongue twister. Leveraging data-driven decision making to refine our approach to evacuation routes. Improved data analysis allows us to target projects with greater precision, ensuring that our resources are directed where they'll be the most effective. In addition to hard data analysis, we're also exploring GIS mapping technologies to enhance our risk assessments. This GIS tool will enable us to visualize our data, allowing us to refine our treatment strategies more accurately. Another area of focus is optimizing resource allocation. By scaling up our projects while consistently seeking to improve cost efficiency, we're ensuring that every dollar is used effectively. A comparison of the performance in the first and second half of 2024 highlights these improvements. Please, next slide. During the first half of the year, we treated 13 miles of evacuation routes. In the second half of the year, we expanded our efforts significantly, treating more than 20 miles. While the cost of these projects increased by 11%, the additional work completed, 53% more miles in 2024, and 24% more acres, demonstrate the marked improvement in efficiency. The increased cost was offset by the substantial gains in treatment coverage, ensuring that our evacuation corridors are clearer, safer, and more resilient to wildfire treatments. In conclusion, our responsibility extends beyond simply meeting project deadlines. We're committed to fostering a long-term culture of resilience and preparedness here in Los Altos Hills. The progress we've made over the past 2 quarters highlights our ability to scale up projects, increase community engagement, and improve cost efficiency, all while maintaining high standards of safety. Notably, We achieved the results while maintaining a record of 0 reportable incidents and 0 safety violations. With continued support from the board, our partner agencies and community, we intend to build on these successes. We'll continue to refine our strategies, expand our mitigation efforts, and ensure that our evacuation routes remain safe, accessible, and ready to use when they're most needed. Thank you for your time tonight. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's Page Mill. That's Ryan.
Hello again. Just one slide for you. Page Mill is back up. This is our third time treating Page Mill. It's probably one of our most visible evacuation routes. It's heavily traveled. We hope to continue with our 0 reportable incidents. I would say it's probably one of our most dangerous routes. So we have the traffic control plan in place, and we've done this before, so I think we'll be very successful. It's 6.5 miles, 119 parcels. Of note, and this isn't statistical yet, or there's a word I'm looking for, but my phone's been ringing for these ROEs. Just like our HIZ requests have gone through the roof, I think that this is probably reactive to that. I'm getting people asking finally and taking note. Oh, what is this ROE and what do you want to do? What can we work with? And I have appointments next week to go meet with people and walk their property and talk to them about what the ROE process is and what we're trying to do. So hopefully that end, we are going to be doing door knocking next week. Is there a question there?
Yes, thank you, Ryan. When we first did this project, as I recall, Palo Alto had done the other side of the street, and then we followed. And I'm just wondering, are they keeping up with their side?
They have done some work. I don't know their schedule. My last interaction with Palo Alto was the Rastradero, and we couldn't sync up exactly on the same time frame, but they did it during that within 2 months of our effort. I don't know on Page Mill.
Okay.
It has been treated recently all the way up to 35.
Okay.
But as we're being very diligent about doing it right now every 2 years, I can't speak for others.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I think Eugenia has a comment.
Oh.
Yeah, we
Go, Eugenia.
have been contacted by Palo Alto's project manager, which is Santa Clara County Fire Safe Council, and they're about a few months behind us. So we're going to be in April. They're guessing June, July-ish to get their side of it done. So yes, we stay in touch with Palo Alto, and we both use the same project manager.
Great.
Thank
Good.
you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. The minutia of what goes into one of these projects, I think you're well aware. We presented that to you before, so I've left that off, but I want to bring to your attention those that might make your phone ring. So what we have so far is we've published our webpage. Thank you, Laura. And Fire Safe Council likewise has this project on their site. The postcards went out on March 7th, and the ROE packets went out on the 14th. I went out in between and put up our sandwich board A-frames. There's 6 of them along Page Mill Road now, and that is what's generating those phone calls. I didn't put it on here, but part of our traffic control plan does include a changeable message sign that will go up 2 weeks before the project, and that goes Page Mill and Arastradero, and so that will get people's attention as well. I mentioned going out and meeting with, my page ran off the page. I'm sorry about that. I will be going out and doing public outreach next week, and I have those appointments already from those that have called in, and we will be publishing a media release as well. So those are the things that will generate discussion and possible phone calls for you. Questions?
Seeing no comments. Great. Thank you so much, both of you. And this is
I
wonderful.
think since Fire Safe Council's here, perhaps they would like to comment because there are very esteemed partners in the evacuation routes and in brush chipping. So give
Happy
them
to
an
have them.
opportunity to speak also. Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, Amanda again here. Not a lot to say right now. We do have a rough project schedule, but Seth and I are in the middle of conversations, but there are plans to conduct fuels reduction work along Page Mill Road and various other projects. Our senior project manager has been out there. Seth, I don't know if you want to say a quick word, but yeah, not a lot to say, but there is a process in place.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon or good evening, Seth Shellett from the Fire Safe Council. As Amanda said, we spent a couple of mornings last month with the city of Palo Alto and the fire marshal walking some fuel breaks and evacuation routes on the upper part of Page Mill Road, where it will connect with Highway 35. So they've asked us to put in a bid for some of those projects to supplement their staff, and that's what we're in the process of doing. So hopefully we'll get some results in the next couple of weeks, and if favorable, of course, we'll coordinate with you on any of those opportunities.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from commission? Seeing none. Any public comments on these reports?
We have one more page of the slide.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Who's giving this?
That would be me again. Welcome back.
Ping pong here.
Yeah. All right. So tonight I'm going to talk about the Moody El Monte evacuation route plan. Normally I wouldn't address this while it's still in the planning process. I wouldn't be addressing it with you guys, but for a couple reasons. You might recall the previous meeting packets that we added the I-280 El Monte interchange to this project. And that's going to allow us to expand our collaboration with Caltrans to renew and build relationships with local teams of our regional partners in anticipation of the I-280 Shaded Fuel Break project. The IHFR team thought it would be beneficial to highlight our recent progress, collaborations, and next steps as we move forward. One of our primary focuses for this area in the early stages of collaboration has been collaborating with Caltrans and the town to align our efforts in scheduling the project. As for example, with Caltrans, for the first time, we're initiating work on the I-280 interchange, and which is a pretty good milestone for us because that's going to give us a good, how do I say it? We're going to learn a lot dealing with that, which is going to help us with the I-280 project that's coming up. While this one's a smaller scale component of the project, it provides valuable experience that'll be instrumental when we plan and execute the I-280 work. We're actively working with Caltrans to secure permits and the necessary resources to ensure that the work is coordinated and meets all regulatory requirements. With the town, our partnership with the town has been highly productive. A key priority has been coordinating efforts with the undergrounding project along Moody El Monte, along Moody Road to prevent overlap and avoid any disruptions. I'm sure you guys are all aware of the undergrounding that's going on there. So with the town, we've had multiple successful meetings to ensure that streamlined coordination. We've increased support of the town of LAH. Wu Jay, Kim, the public works director, has agreed to create a 2-week window for us for our permit so that it doesn't interfere with any other contractors. He's actually holding them off so that we get the permit for the 2-week window that we need to complete the project, which is also a first and is showing that we're building good collaboration with them. We have ongoing communication with monthly meetings in place to ensure transparency, progress, tracking, and proactive problem solving. This level of collaboration minimizes delays and maximizes efficiency. I mean, what else can you say about that, right? Mm-hmm. So the CEQA has also been submitted early to the state clearinghouse and the county clerk with town collaboration, early start for enhanced program. Given the scale and complexity of this project, we made a strategic decision to initiate work early to ensure a robust planning cycle. This approach is particularly critical as we begin engaging on the interstate infrastructure, which requires additional coordination approvals and logistics planning. So in summary, we're making excellent progress on the Moody Almonte evacuation route. And thanks to early planning, strategic coordination, and our strong partnerships. So as we move forward, we'll continue to work closely with Caltrans, maintain collaboration with the town, and proactively manage our timeline and resources. So that concludes that report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, great. In that case, any public comments on this presentation? Seeing none, great. In that case, we will be ready to move on to item 9, which is the I-280 hazardous fuel reduction project. Before I hand it over to Commissioner Warren, does anyone need a break? Are we okay? This is kind of the final approach towards, we got this and the finance budget, and then personnel. Won't be that long, but does anyone need a break? Is anyone okay to soldier on through? Okay, just wanted to ask. Great, let's go ahead and move to item 9. Commissioners Warren and McDonald will present this item.
Great. All right, Toby, keep me honest here. So where we are with the project, the staff has been moving forward quite effectively with the process of selecting a contractor to do the professional services to manage the project. As you'll all recall, they started the process before the holidays, in which they put out a solicitation for bids. They've been through that process. They received a number of bids. They've gone through a selection process. The team continues to work. They've whittled it down now to a named contractor here, TRC Companies, as documented in the agenda. Where the team is at this point is they're in negotiation with that. Unfortunately, the goal had been to bring that final agreement to the commission tonight to approve it. Unfortunately, they weren't able to literally cross the T's and dot the I's in time. So what we're seeking tonight is permission, delegation of authority to our general manager to complete the agreement and sign it off with the provisions that we have in here with a dollar cap on the value of the contract. And the idea here is that we want to empower the general manager and the staff to be able to sign that deal, and we don't have to wait another month to start work. The team is working directly with county council, so county council will sign off on this agreement before it is inked, and our dollar exposure is set tonight. So what we're asking for is in 9B is to approve a delegation of authority for the general manager to complete the negotiations, execute it, and then to actually engage with the contractor.
Great.
Toby, did I? Perfect. Thank you.
Any questions from any of the commissioners on it?
I don't see how we can possibly have one person oversee the whole thing. And I can't think of anybody better than general manager.
Okay, in that case, since this is a discussion item, we'll now, any public comment on this item?
First, I'd like to question the process. There was nothing in the packet on this item until 3 o'clock this afternoon. And what's in the packet really doesn't provide any information to any of you. You don't know how many people were responded. You haven't seen the response from the party that they're going to talk about awarding a $1 million contract from. There's been no opportunity for the public to see any of this information. Doesn't seem to me to be transparency or good governance if you're just going to rubber stamp without seeing anything this program. It talks about delegating to the general manager authority. It says enter into the project agreements consistent with the PSA. I don't really know what that means. Does that mean that the general manager has authority to grant projects over the $1,050,000 or only within the $1,050,000? It also talks about coordinate project services for evacuation route hardening projects, including development contractor bids for vegetation mitigation, traffic control, and biological surveys. The question I have is this only regards to I-280, or does this take the place of the staff that's doing all the work for these hardening projects around the town? Thank you very much.
Thank you for the questions. Okay, moving on to item B, as discussed and recommended under item 9A from the subcommittee. I will now entertain a motion for item 9B to approve the delegation of authority to the general manager to negotiate and execute a professional services agreement with TRC Companies, Inc., or an affiliated entity, for technical services and construction management services in an amount not to exceed $1,050,000 with a term of up to 5 years, and with the general manager acting as the district's authorized representative for subsequent project agreements, subject to review and approval by county council as to form and legality. This delegation of authority will expire on May 31st, 2025. Will the commissioner making the motion and the commissioner seconding the motion please state their names for the benefit of recording? I'm assuming we'll have subcommittee members be those motioning and
No, I want to delegate to someone else.
Oh, okay.
Let
Anyone else?
someone else do.
All right, Tyson moves 9B as stated so eloquently by the president in the very recent past.
McDonald seconds.
Thank you so much. Any discussion? Seeing none. Any public comment?
I see none.
Okay, let's take a roll call.
Right. President Spreen.
Yes.
Vice President McDonald.
Yes.
Commissioner Basiji.
Yes.
Commissioner Gadambi.
Yes.
Commissioner Tonka.
Yes.
Commissioner Tyson.
Yes.
Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
And the motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much. Let's see, moving on to item 10A, is that right? Yes. An update on the fiscal year 25-26 final draft budget.
Okay, President Spreen and Vice President McDonald and Commissioners, I'll try to make this quick. I know it's late in the evening. My intent tonight is just to give you an update as to how our discussions have been going with the county relative to our budget. So we basically, as you know, as of February 18th, we provided our line item budget and our narrative to the county. They've been looking at the numbers, and between that time and now, General Manager Logan and I have had several discussions with them, and tonight I'm just updating you as to where we are on those discussions. Next slide, please. So you may recall, and I'm not going through the numbers here, but as you may recall that when we presented the narrative and the budget to this commission, we presented an idea of a new additional fund. And that new fund was called the Major Projects Fund and Community Infrastructure Fund. The concept was to separate the major projects from the general fund to allow tracking to be much easier and also to mitigate fluctuations. And we also introduced this concept of transferring dollars for future improvements into the future into that fund. Well, I can tell you that in our discussions with the county, they have not balked in terms of our total allocations. So they have not modified that. But it does not look like at this point in time that this concept of the new fund it will be something that will emanate. We're still in discussion, but it seems as though we're going in a bit of a different direction. Again, our allocations remain the same, but this concept of the new fund may in fact not take place this year. We may in fact stay with the one fund concept. So what would that look like? And that would be the next slide. So essentially on the previous slide, there was this horizontal presentation of a general fund and a new major projects fund and your total. We may be moving towards a vertical presentation where, as you can see, we still have the same $22.167 million in allocations. But if you'll see here where I've highlighted in gray, we would have general operations, and we might create a new cost center now within the general fund called infrastructure and major projects. We'll still be able to track it. We still have the same number of allocations, but it will not be separated into that fund. And I think from the county's perspective, at least in our initial discussions, is that at this point in time, they don't see that funding source as being distinct. So they want to remain within the general fund, one fund concept. And that idea may change in the future as we enter into obligations and contracts, i.e., let's say something like for the new fire facility, when that day happens, then that distinction may become more clear for them. So nothing's changed in terms of allocations, same revenues, same allocation numbers that are still on the table to be discussed, but the concept of two funds probably, from what we can tell, is going to go down to the one fund concept with a new cost center created that will separate the cost centers vertically. So we haven't, it still allows us to track, still allows us to isolate, but what we won't be doing, and if you go to the next slide, Corey, but what we won't be doing under this model is we won't be making that transfer for the new fire facility into this new fund. That will remain in the general fund. So in essence, in our discussions that I had today with the county on the very top rectangle you'll see there, that we have isolated the $3.9 million that we want to identify in this new cost center. Again, all the dollars remain the same, but just in one fund. And this will be the new concept that we're moving towards. If it emanates and continues in this direction, we won't be proposing this transfer of dollars into this new fund. It will just stay in one. And again, transfers are not allocations. They're simply fund transfers. So if we think further as to what that may look like on the next slide, again, what would happen here is at the end of the day, at the end of 25-26, that $15.3 million would find itself back into unassigned. And we would have that same concept as we had in the prior year. And last slide. The other discussion that we had with OBA, and I mentioned this at my last update, is we're getting close to deciding as what our starting point is on our budget. So from what we can tell right now, our base budget as defined by the county is $17.14 million. We have proposed to the county routine adjustments of about $406,000. And our new requests, and they define our new requests as either one-time or ongoing, approximate that $4.6 million that you see in the middle. Again, that's our total 22.167. So the white shaded rectangle, rectangles there, one-time requests and ongoing requests. Those are the discussions now that we will be having with the county over the next several weeks, looking at each individual request. And what makes up the bulk of those dollars is I-280, the programmatic EIR, project contingency dollars and fixed assets, and professional services. So those are the items that we're discussing right now. So with that, that is our update. We'll have another update next month, but any questions as to how this is evolving?
I have a quick question.
Please speak the mic if you could.
So, you've done an amazing job with the budget. I just have a quick question that just, there is some amount in the clearing, right? When just before, do we have any optimal investments that will actually help, garner some interest or something like that for the county? Maybe some securities like the Treasury securities or something like that. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm asking without knowing much about this, but is there a way we can, for immediate thing without penalty that we can have for emergencies that gives you a higher interest and that will go back to the community, or you can ladder something or like an intermediate thing and then have a slightly long-term thing to bring back the
Yes. Yes. Well, great question. So we are blessed as being part of the county. We're able to invest every dollar that we have in our funds in what's called the county investment pool. And it's a county managed investment pool, and it actually does quite well. It competes very well with the local agency investment fund, which is the state pool, and it really does well in terms of returns. So every dollar that we have is invested in that pool. We're able to draw from it on a 24-hour basis, but nonetheless, it stays in that pool and the investments come in. So those are tracked. We don't have to transfer money back and forth because of our relationship with the county. And on a 24/7 basis, it's invested in that pool and it earns interest. So we do get fairly good yield. We don't beat the market excessively, but we stay within the reasonable range, in a safe range. And they do invest in a number of securities, as you mentioned, that are safe and secure from a government standpoint. So yes, those investments are part of our equation.
Thank you. Looks like you've thought of everything.
Well, the county did. Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments here?
And I can just add real quick that, so our last quarterly investment interest, which was just received, was $329,654. So
that is
awesome.
Yes, we expect approximately about $800,000 to $900,000 of interest this year.
Thank you so much.
Close to zero.
Yeah.
Several years back, those numbers were close to zero.
Yeah. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, move on to item 10B, which is our annual establishing special tax override rate.
All right.
District Clerk Vargas will provide us a report.
Yes, thank you. Well, first I want to start by I need to apologize because I forgot to upload the attachment to my memo report, which is ordinance number 1 of the fire district from 1981. So that is actually online now if you want to see it. But the basis of this item is that it dates back to 1978 when Proposition 13 was adopted, and as a result, the district, believe it or not, we lost 60% of our property tax revenue. So in order to continue to meet our commitment for fire protection, at the time, the district called for a special election, and ordinance number 1 was adopted in January of 1981. This allowed for an annual special tax to be imposed on district parcels. So the special tax was imposed on the district for 4 years. And to continue in this process, though, each year it is an annual request. And so each year the commission can vote to continue, to reestablish this special tax override. But, we haven't done it since I think it was 1987, I said in my memo report. So I think since the district is currently in good financial standing, probably the best recommendation is the commission to establish this special tax override rate at 0 for the fiscal year 25-26.
Thank you very much. Any questions from any commissioners on this, since it is an odd item, but something we do every year? One of those powerful votes we take.
This is one of my favorite things to do in the year, and I realize I have a very dull life, I guess. But how many people can look at their government and say they take everything they can from us, but this will mark my 10th opportunity to vote for no additional taxes for us. So I'm looking forward to that.
Exactly. In that case, I will entertain a motion to set the fiscal year 25-26 special tax override rate at $0.00. Will the commissioner
So move, Tonka.
Okay, oh, you
I
beat
just
you
want
to
to
it.
beat everybody to it.
Do we have a second? Vasiji seconds. Thank you so much. Any discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, let's have a roll call vote.
All right. President Spreen,
Yes.
Vice President McDonald,
Yes.
Commissioner Basiji,
Yes.
Commissioner Kadambi,
Yes.
Commissioner Tonka, Commissioner Tyson, and Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
And the motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Moving on to item 11, personnel. General Manager Logan will present us with this item.
Yes, thank you. Item 11A is the proposed 4th amendment to the Programs, Plannings, and Grants Managers Employment Agreement, which is included in the agenda packet. Government Code Section 45953C3 requires the commission to orally report a summary of the proposed compensation before taking final action to adopt that compensation, hereby approving the employment agreement. The proposed 4th amendment to the at-will full-time exempt Programs, Planning, and Grant Manager Employment Agreement will be effective April 1st, 2025, and includes the following compensation: wages. Annual compensation for the Programs, Planning, and Grant Manager in the proposed agreement is $201,136, which is equivalent to $96.70 per hour. If the district offers a retirement plan or health benefit plan, the employee will be eligible to enroll in such plan. All other compensation and benefits, including vacation leave, sick leave, technology, stipend, uniform allowance, remain unchanged. I recommend approval, and thank you.
Thank you, General Manager Logan. Any clarifying questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion and a second. I'm sorry? No, that comes after the motion.
Oh.
Yep. So any motion and a second for this?
All right. Tyson moves approval of 11A.
Tonka seconds.
Thank you very much. And any discussion? Seeing none, any public comment on this item?
I see none.
Seeing none, thank you. We will now have a roll call.
Okay. President Spreen.
Yes.
Vice President. Oh my gosh. I have an old name there. Vice President
that.
McDonald.
Yes.
Commissioner Basiji.
Yes.
Commissioner, Commissioner Tonka. I forgot. I know. I cut and paste. I'm sorry. Commissioner Kadambi. It's late. Now Commissioner Tonka. And Commissioner Tyson.
Yes.
Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Moving on to item 12, District Clerk Report. District Clerk Vargas, this is yours.
Okay, yes. So I came here tonight. I was all prepared to give the stink eye to somebody, anybody, but I am happy to report that nobody gets the stink eye tonight. We are 100%.
Excellent.
Everyone has turned it in. And so I have no report except to say thank you.
Thank you so much. Any public comment on that? Seeing none. We will therefore move on to item 13, commission member reports. This is an opportunity for commissioners to provide reports on any future agenda topics. I will offer any comments from the commissioners. I'll start just to remind you that starting next month, we'll begin what we do annually in terms of a general manager evaluation. You've received some information, I believe, already from Marcy in terms of how that process might go. If you have any questions, please reach out to her with any comments or questions on how that works. And we will have we will have a closed session part of our upcoming meetings as we always do. We will probably do it as part of our ongoing meetings. So we know recognizing those will take place sort of in the latter part of the meeting. We'll try and make that so it's fairly short and fits into the meeting. But I just want to raise that to everyone's attention. Please reach out to Marcy if you have any questions. Let's see, any other questions or comments about future agendas or future topics? Seeing none. Any public comments on future agenda topic items?
I see none.
Seeing none. Item 13B, this is the notice that the next regular commission meeting is scheduled for April 15th, 2025, in person and hybrid at the Town Hall Council Chambers, this very room. Any comments from the commission? Everyone planning on being here or not being here, or?
Filing your taxes.
Oh, don't remind me. Thank you for we end on a sour note. Yeah, any public comments on that? I don't know why there would be. In that case, we'll move on to item 14, adjournment. This concludes the March 18th, 2025 regular meeting of the Los Altos Hills County Fire District. This meeting is adjourned at 9:33 p.m. 3 minutes after my prediction. Oh, well. General Analyst Georgie, please stop the recording.